Yeah. Don't get me wrong. We all agree there's abuse out there and it's got to be dealt with. But what they're claiming is so off the mark. And why would we say, it's like, why would you try and, you know, you're not going to be able to work anything out with them because they are so stuck in their cult. And that is what it is. It's a cult, as far as I'm
Yeah.
concerned, because it has no
Well,
scientific
it's cult
empirical
mentality.
evidence to support it. It's just
Exactly.
another Jim Jones
I
at
mean, it
Waco.
is straight up cult mentality.
Yep,
Yeah. Don't drink the Kool-Aid
right. And that's the problem.
because you might not come back. Stick with coffee.
Yep. You don't like the world, well, you don't create a separate cult
Yeah. I mean,
to hurt everybody else. Live your little life by yourself. You don't want to be involved in the
in
courts.
my
You don't want
opinion,
to do
from what I've read
reunification
from her,
therapy. You go live. You go right ahead. But if
yeah,
the court orders it, You're still in this society.
yeah.
You want to move out and have a separate society where you can. The court says, "Oh, you don't have to do reunification." Well, that's not the way it is. Our system wants treatment.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, it's not
we could
working
have her
out.
on if it
It's
was an
not. No,
actual debate between her and Bill.
it's
You
not.
know, in my opinion, it's not. But I mean,
It's not worth it. Let
in
me ask
the
you something. Would
long
you
run,
actually put
if we
Tina
were ever
Swithin on?
desperate,
Would you actually put Tina Swithin on? Do you know
yes, I would. I would.
she has attacked so many people and
I
she's
would.
so here you have
I
to
would. I would.
understand. Well, I get that. I get you would, but it would
Because
not be
here's the
beneficial
thing.
to us.
Here's the thing. It, it may, if done correctly, that the problem is keeping these people wrangled in.
Okay,
Okay, you don't give them a free for all. You do
right,
not give them a free for all, and you have to have somebody with equal weight on the opposite side.
right.
So you get, they spout their gibberish, and then you have somebody with the facts come up, and you kill that gibberish, making them look completely stupid. But
Oh,
that's
the
not what
problem.
we're about. We're not about making people look stupid.
Yeah, but with Clint, here's the problem. So here we go. We present our scientific empirical evidence as to blah blah blah. They say that's not true. That's not valid. So how are you going to argue with them when they're denying that the actual evidence? You
But
can't.
see, that's where I'm different. That's where I'm different. As a journalist, I say, okay, you're stating this evidence isn't factual. What's not factual about it? And then
Right.
every time they bring something, well, this ain't factual. Well, here it is. It's in black and white. So it is factual. So where are you getting the opinion that this is not proven? This is not, you have all the clinical data,
That's
all the
here's
scientific
Clint.
data. So what specifically, you know, that's how you handle people like that.
Clint.
And the thing about it is people who want to believe them are going to believe them no matter what.
Right. But this is why inclusion in the DSM is so fucking important. It stops all of this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's why don't get me wrong,
Well,
it would have been fine if the professionals, when I told them 10 years ago, stop using the word parental alienation. You've got a lot of other terms. Use hostile aggressive parenting, custodial interference, child kidnapping, whatever. I had a bunch of them. But they all said, no, no, no.
yeah.
We have to keep the term parental alienation. Okay, you want to keep the term parental alienation? Then you need to make sure it's considered a crime or it's in the DSM. DSM is a far better place for it to be. It will eventually become a crime.
Yes.
Okay. But in the DSM, now we can formalize protocol for treatment, and they can't deny reunification therapy. They can't claim it's not real. They can't claim it's pseudoscience. They can no longer keep attacking the experts because it's now an actual diagnosis. You can't go into court say, "Oh,
But
well, the child's got Captra." The judge looks at you and goes, "What?"
okay,
In
here's how
reality, all five, six of those DSM diagnoses all quantify as past. Therefore, PA is all five or six of those diagnoses. So just give it the name username parental
but
alienation.
Joni here Joni, here's the thing about this. I look at this as like Israel. It's never going to stop. They're
Uh,
always going to, even if we put it in the DSM, it's always going to be an argument.
Okay, it
You're
might, they
always going to
will,
have that
okay,
in some
yes,
way, shape, or form.
they will still attempt to argue it, but the arguments will be deflated because they can't claim it's now not real. Now, and you can't really compare it to Israel because this is kind of, um, that's a war over land. And that's an
That
ancient war.
it's not at this point. At this point, it's not over land. It's just what
And
is.
both
You know,
sides are
it's just
actually
what
right.
is.
But both sides are right because both had ownership of this land. And
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
so this is part of the problem. Whereas this has nothing to do with an ownership. This has to do with scientific empirical evidence that shows it's a serious problem. Either way, it needs to, they might not, okay, so here, yes, they're going to keep arguing it, but their arguments will now be deflated because they won't have there's no backing to it. Israel and the can both of them can make a claim that the land was theirs, and it is absolutely true. Both of them are correct. The land at one time was. They can't do that with the DSM and say, well, it's not real. Uh, it is real. It maybe you would like it not to be real, but it is real, and you can't have both. You can't have both. Yes, it's real, and no, it wasn't, and no, it isn't. So that's why their argument will fail. Okay, that's why but it will slow things down. It will get proper training and education out there, and these people will become a very small sect, and they will become looking like the idiots because they
They
continue.
already look like idiots.
Well, no, they don't. That's
But
the problem,
it's
Kitlin.
idiots. It's idiot. No, here's the
They
thing,
look
Joan.
like
Here's
idiots
the
to
thing.
us,
Now
but the
I'm coming from this
legislators,
from a
no, you have to understand. We think they look like idiots, but legislators are not seeing them that way, and they're passing laws that are dangerous, like banning reunification. Okay? That's they
But
are
here's the thing. You're looking at this from someone. Let me chime in here. You're looking at this from someone who's been doing this for 30 years. Okay, I've not been doing this for 30 years. I've been doing this for 8. So I look at it from a different aspect. The way I see it is they already look like idiots. The only reason they're getting listened to is cash. They
yes,
have more funding
that may be
from people
true.
who are profiting from this stuff.
That
So
may be true.
money will always trump truth. You know that yourself.
Right.
Money will always trump truth. So
And that's
that's the issue.
I don't
We do not have the financial backing that they do. If we did, we'd be golden.
I know, I know. I don't disagree on that. And I've said that over and over also. But I think that's for that very reason, getting it into the DSM, we might have more standing to get more money now. Now we are legitimately in the DSM. Now grants and funding and money will be
Oh
easier
yeah,
to get.
I agree
So,
with you on that. Yeah, if it
and
got put
that's
in,
another
the
reason
funding
to
would
do
start
it.
shifting because now. But how do you get it in without the funding? That's the trick. You know, we can keep it. We can keep their opposition out for a large part with factual data and everything,
I
but
know I want to
without the
make a
proper
note.
funding to grease the wheels properly is the term I'll use. It's gonna stay like this until we get somebody who can actually push it
Why do you
to
think I
the
keep
point
wishing
where
I
they
would win
can't
a
resist
million
it anymore.
dollars? If I could win $1 million,
Yeah,
you can't really donate to a campaign, but
yeah, you can.
you can. Not as a nonprofit, you cannot. You lose your nonprofit, and I wouldn't take that chance.
No, not as a nonprofit, but as a private individual.
I can do it.
But yeah, I mean that's the whole thing. Is it comes down, and I hate saying it this way, it comes down to the very thing we're fighting: money. They have it, we don't. Look at
We
how many.
and
Another
well,
aspect
let's
is
be
look
real.
at how many groups.
Divorce isn't about the kids most of the time. It's about what? The money,
No,
the
no,
control.
yeah, Yeah. Look at how many groups there are in the United
Mhm.
States alone on parental alienation. Okay.
Mhm.
These are all separate groups. And I stated this when I was with the Father's Rights Movement, is if all these groups would come together,
Right.
get their, pardon my French, fucking egos out of their fucking asses, come together as a single voice and say,
Right.
this is what the reality is. This is what's going on with our children. Things
Yep.
would change. But because all these groups stay divided because of egos,
No,
I
hang
saw
on.
that when Kentucky passed it.
Hang on. Hang on. The PA group agrees. Domestic violence is horrible. We agree that the courts are dysfunctional. The division is that they don't believe that people use custodial interference to impede with a relationship that it's only a protective parent doing it to protect their kids. That's the only thing
But
we
that
don't
brings
agree
us to
on.
the
Because
definition.
they actually
But
agree
that
that
brings
false
us to
allegations
the
are a problem.
yeah. But here, it brings us to the definition of parental alienation, where it literally says universally, it's the weaponizing of a child
Yep, domestic
against
violence
the
says
other
that.
parent. That is abuse. That is domestic violence in any shape, way, or form you want to shape it.
I call it domestic violence by proxy, and started
It-
using that term and coining that term like
exactly,
15
exactly.
years ago or more, because that is what it is. So while we can come to the table on agreeing that false allegations are a problem, we can come to the table that we agree that domestic violence and abuse is a problem. We can come to the table and agree that that parents do protect their kids. What we can't seem to come to the table on is that parental alienation is real and that it is not used to thwart domestic violence and give the abuser the child.
I think that
Domestic,
has shifted. I think it's not the fact that we can't come to the table about parental alienation being real. I think it comes more down to how the term and definition is applied in the courtroom.
that, well, yes, we'll agree. And that seems to be the bigger issue is that their
Because
fight seems to be in the
a
courtroom.
lot of these organizations, DV organization, yeah,
Mhm.
go ahead, go ahead.
No, you're right. A lot of this has to do with, it doesn't have to do with, claiming this parental alienation. It's the fact that the term is used in the courts and now they're in trouble because it is a problem. It is a form of abuse if someone's claiming they're committing parental alienation. But then there's cases
Because
because of
because
failed
here's
inappropriate training.
yeah,
This is the next problem that these people, professionals in the family courts, do not know how to properly recognize true allegations from false allegations, how to do this in a timely manner, so that if it's a false allegation, the children aren't falsely pulled for an extended period of time. This is why I like my three strikes you're out program. A judge can tailor it to fit
yeah.
any case's
But
needs.
here's the thing. Here's the other thing. If it is defined as abuse, as domestic violence, let's just use the broad term of domestic violence for this. If it is defined as domestic violence, that is a criminal crime.
Yes.
Family courts cannot keep this in their
Adjudicate.
dockets. It has to be shifted to criminal courts,
Don't disagree.
which means family courts lose the money. So we're back to the money wheel.
Don't disagree. And this is why, and I have been saying for a long time, anything family court cannot adjudicate on criminal matters. They're a civil court, and they really shouldn't be adjudicating on a criminal matter. All criminal matters of allegations of abuse, neglect, whatever, should be in criminal court. Anything having to do financial it can be dealt with in family court. That's a civil piece.
Yeah,
Mediation. But the
I, I'm
minute, go ahead.
I'm going to tell you something that I don't talk. I don't talk about my case that much. In the beginning of my case against my ex-wife,
Right.
the family court judge actually wanted to charge me with a contempt charge that was a criminal charge for trespass. Okay. Luckily, I knew one of the public defenders guys in the courthouse. He found out about it and spoke to me about it. He said she can't do that. She doesn't have the authority to charge you and hear the hearing. She has to go to criminal court. So he actually wrote the motion for me, got it out of her hands. She was pissed. Criminal court threw it out.
Of course. This is why I like that.
Because this is
the proper courts.
Yeah. Because it shows the limits to these courts.
Yep.
There are authority limits. Like you said, they're a civil court. They are a court of equity, property court. That's all they are. They're no different than your
I like that court of equity. I like that court. You know what? One second. I want to pause. And as we were saying,
okay. So, but yeah, but here's the thing, and we did pause just a little bit to have an offside conversation, but here's the thing: is people do not understand that these family, or we'll call them what they are, domestic relations courts, that these domestic relations court judges do not have the all God power that they think they do. They can't hear, like we've said, they can't hear on criminal matters. So when you get a charge of domestic violence in family courts, that is a criminal charge. That has to be heard in a criminal court. But yet 90% of these criminal charges are heard in these domestic relations courts with no adjudication ability. Now, that varies from state to state, naturally, because every state has its own ability to govern its own family court system. But the ground layers are there. So why are these domestic relations courts hearing criminal charges and then adjudicating them and holding people guilty on things they don't have power over?
I have been saying this for
but here's the kicker.
Long, and
we as a society, but here's the kicker to this, Joni, is we as a society go along with it.
Because we don't seem
to believe they have that authority.
Right. And I'm not sure if that's because,
you know, I'm a big believer. I'm a big believer in education. And I think in some point in our educational system, we need to institute a class for students to learn about the factuality of law. I'm
not, adverse to that either.
So,
I think
so they're not going in if something comes up, they're not blind.
I think also family attorneys.
Europe does this.
Right. But I think family attorneys don't want to take on the criminal cases. So they're not going to let you push it to criminal court, which is one of the reasons many cases where there's criminal charges don't end up there. The only time those criminal charges end up there is when there is no longer a family court case, or the person who's filing them files them outside of the family court. Otherwise, if they file them in family court, the family courts keep holding on to them. Instead of saying, okay, you've made a criminal allegation, we need to push this to a separate court where things can be properly adjudicated. And in the meantime, bop, bop, bop.
Yep. See, here's the thing now. Because I specialize in South Carolina and everything, South Carolina is one of the few states, and I think there are only 2 states that do this, that actually have the reasons for divorce listed in their state constitution. So in the state of South Carolina, there are only 5 reasons you can get a divorce. Drugs, adultery, which is still a criminal crime in South Carolina, physical abuse. Now remember that term, physical abuse, 1-year abandonment, and then alcohol. Okay, so they call it physical abuse. They don't call it domestic violence. They call it physical abuse. Now, pull up the definition. I'll let you do this. Pull up the definition to physical abuse.
Okay. Hang on. I'm looking up Connecticut's legal grounds for divorce. Okay, so now you want me to look up the term legal. What'd you say?
Look up the term physical abuse.
Physical abuse. Thank you. Physical abuse. Definition. Hang on. Got it. All right. Hang on. I'm going to read this. Everybody hears it. Looking to see What is okay, I'll use this definition. Physical abuse is defined as an intentional act causing injury or trauma to another person through bodily contact. It is a deliberate act of force that results in harm, injury, and trauma to the victim's body. This can include a range of behaviors from hitting, slapping, and punching to more severe forms of violence. What is missing? Well, physical abuse is physical abuse, but the definition of abuse is supposed to needs to also include psychological. But go ahead. Your point about physical abuse.
Now, yeah, now pull up the definition for domestic violence.
Definition of domestic violence. Okay. Violent or aggressive behavior within the home, typically involving the violent abuse of a spouse or partner, but that's not complete at all. Intimate partner violence can be defined as a pattern of behavior in a relationship. This is from the United Nations. You want that one?
Just whatever definition it pulls up.
Oh, there's several, but I'm going to use the UN. Is also called domestic violence, domestic abuse, or intimate partner violence, can be defined as a pattern of behavior in any relationship that is used to gain or maintain power and control over an intimate partner. Abuse is physical, sexual, emotional, economic, and psychological actions or threats of actions that influence another person. This includes any behaviors that frighten, intimidate, terrorize, manipulate, hurt, humiliate, blame, injure, or wound someone. Domestic abuse can happen to anyone, blah, blah, blah. Okay, your point. Go on.
Okay. Now, the words you just read, are they not the same words that apply to physical abuse?
No,
That you from the definition you just used?
no, because their definition
Why
for
not?
domestic violence includes additional things, not just physical. It includes sexual, emotional, economic, and psychological, and terrorism.
Okay,
That
but
is
but
the
by
difference
general
between
definition,
physical
but by
abuse.
general definition,
No, physical abuse is a form
okay,
of domestic
but
violence.
but here's the thing. Physical abuse, okay, you just said it. Physical abuse is a form of domestic violence, which is criminal.
Correct. Make it
So,
okay.
why are family courts or domestic relations courts
Yes,
hearing these cases?
we've already hashed that one out. We absolutely both agree family courts should not have them. Now back to what you said were grounds for divorce in South Carolina. In Connecticut, it's a no-fault divorce. Irretrievable breakdown, living apart,
Yeah.
fault-based grounds, adultery, willful desertion, intolerable cruelty, habitual intemperaments, such as alcohol and drugs, fraudulent contract, imprisonment, and legal confinement. So yeah, I mean, basically they're all the same. I think where we have to get to is that family courts need to focus only on the civil portion of family cases. If an allegation of abuse, neglect, or other domestic violence, including financial abuse or emotional or psychological, comes into play, a judge must transfer this case immediately to a criminal docket and get a team of professionals must step in immediately to start investigating. It cannot be a 6 or 8 month investigation. It has to be done within 2 to 3 weeks, 4 weeks tops, because it's not fair to the kids. All that time that the child has been pulled from a parent who may have been falsely accused is more time that the other parent who's making the accusations has to brainwash and program the child and to confuse the child so that when they finally back to see the other parent, they're splitting and they're psychologically destroyed.
And thereby the courts aid in weaponizing a child against a parent.
Don't disagree. Not Don't get us wrong, folks. There are a few judges out there who actually get this and recognize what's going
Yeah.
on. But they're few and far between. Those are the judges who have made it their business to get educated, to listen to webinars, to read up on the latest stuff. And they're not easily swayed by a group of women who have money. I
Well,
think.
the other thing about this, Joni, is we also got to mention that this is all generational as well.
Mhm.
The judges who sit on the bench, my mouth ain't working right now, uh, primarily who sit on the bench currently are older judges who are still using the atomic family model. Dad works, mom stays home. Where today's society, that doesn't exist. Both parents usually work.
Not only that,
Okay. So
go ahead.
there are, like you said, there are younger judges who are on the bench who understand the societal shift and understand that a child does require both parents at some point in time. You know, a good point to this. Now, a lot of our listeners and everything don't understand Islamic law and stuff like this, but in Islamic law, there is doctrine that they have gone by for millions of years. We'll just use that term. And it basically states that if it's a boy and the couple separate, the boy has to stay with the dad until the age of 14. Then he shifts to the mom because it's marriage age. And it's the same thing with the girl. The girl stays with the mom until 14, then shifts to the dad because he's got to find her a husband. So now in the Emirates, this law is changing in the Emirates. They're actually countering something that has been in existence for years, stating that, hey, now we have to figure out a way for a child to be with both parents simultaneously for the benefit of the child. This is virtually nearly unheard of in Islamic law, but it is becoming a growing path there. So if
Interesting.
these countries can do
Do
it,
we know
why do we
why?
have a problem with it?
Do we know why
There
they're
was a
making this?
case. Yes, yes. There was a case a few years back that I actually got to interview the lawyers and everything on when I was with another organization. And they stated that when they looked into this, a lot of people who live in the Emirates are expats. They're from different countries. But
Okay,
when you live in a country, you have to go by their law. So the Emirates realized that, hey, we used to do, if you're, let's say, German, if the father's German, the mom's Spanish, well, we have to pick what country laws we have to go by, Germany or Spain. And now they've come to the realization that it's too widely spread. So they've listened to other doctrines, other countries stating the benefit of a child. And the Islamic government in the Emirates is agreeing, hey, we need to keep our younger generations as little harm possible emotionally, mentally, because this is the people that are going to run our futures.
Clint, how many times have you heard me say, if we screw these kids up, these are the kids that are going to be running our country in the future? We have so many kids. Forget about divorce. Forget about, the
Yeah,
Islamic, Israel and the wars. We have so many younger kids who have such extreme PTSD, stress, and anxiety because they can't make enough money to live on their own. Those that do are very lucky, or they come from very wealthy families. They are feel like they're failures. They don't know how they're ever going to survive in this world. They can't, they're lost because what they're
yeah,
seeing going on is traumatized. Now add this in for a child who's going through a situation where they are being forced to take sides between two parents. And not because there's abuse, where that's all
mm,
abuse, physical abuse, and other abuses are sidelined. We're talking no abuse except the psychological abuse of keeping a child and making false allegations. False allegations is
exactly. I've
psychological abuse of
I've
a
seen
child.
cases. I've seen cases where parents have come in and they've used that old adage. Well, he would spank our children all the time. Well, later on, you hear that the mom would say, and I don't like using the mom dad nomenclatures, but we'll use it in this instance. The mom will say, well, I told my son, wait till his father comes home. So the mom naturally wasn't the abuser because she would push it off on the dad.
And
And the
he,
dad would get the
right,
story from the mom, believing mom, and next thing you know, that you're an abuser
right. And in most of those
in the
cases,
court system.
right, in most of those cases, it turns out, okay, most states, an open hand, just like a sting, like a tap up on side the head to
Hmm.
get to wake the kid up, or this doesn't hurt the child. It's getting them, making them aware that there's this isn't good, this isn't safe, this is inappropriate, because I've talked to you now 3 times and you haven't listened. Your mother has spent all day telling you XYZ. We're going upstairs. No, do I believe in corporal punishment? No, but this isn't corporal punishment. This is like, hey,
Mm-mm.
wake up. It's no
We had
different.
this conversation a couple
And
of
let's
days
be
ago.
right. And I have a client who's going through this. And what bothers me is, oh, but it's okay to scream and yell at your child. Tell the child they're a piece of shit. Tell them that they're other parent, they're just like their other parent. And that's not abuse. And that's bloody worse than a tap on the shoulder. Hey, what are you doing? Or
Yeah,
on the butt.
you know, we
That's
we
far
all
worse.
heard the
This, a
we all
child
heard the
goes,
saying.
oh,
We
shoot.
all heard the saying. We all heard the saying, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me, which is false.
Very
Words
false.
can do more damage than any stick and stone,
Yep. So, and
especially in today's society. I mean,
I have a case where the child was made to believe that the father abused them when they grabbed their arm as they were walking through a supermarket parking lot. And he said, well, yeah, you abused me. And the father says,
yeah,
no, that's not quite what happened. You were just about to run in front of a moving car, and I grabbed you by the arm and pulled you back. Oh, yeah, you're right. It so to tell this kid a lie, now the kid's critical thinking skills are affected. They can't even evaluate things because they really think this is true. Now they find out, oh, it isn't.
yeah,
Well, the hope is
yeah.
this is
It, we see it in today's TV shows a lot. I watch a lot of different variety shows and stuff like this, and we see this. Every show has some point in it where the child calls the cops on the parent. Let's just use there's a NYPD, I think it was. A kid must have probably was 10, 11, called the cops. His mom abused him. The cop shows up. Well, what'd you do? Well, I used a belt on his butt because he didn't listen.
a belt's a little
That's not
much.
abuse.
That's
Well,
abuse.
no, I mean, you got to remember the generational shift. There, people used to use flip flops, belts, fly swatters.
Yeah, but that was
Back
still
then that
abuse.
was a going thing.
Okay, I'm not
But
saying it
it's what
wasn't the
people
going
were
thing.
normed
It's
to.
still abuse because it leaves a mark. You can seriously do physical damage to somebody with a belt. A
I will
flip-flop,
agree with that.
not so
I will agree
much.
with that.
So that is absolute abuse. If you
You
had
ask
said,
any
if you had
person,
said the
you ask
example
any
had been a
baby boomer or
flip-flop,
Gen Xer,
but you,
you ask any Gen Xer about a flip flop, and they know the truth. Uh, but
it's a
that's
no,
all generational shifting because
yes.
now you have parents that do timeouts.
And the timeout, if that's
I'm
not
so
working, what's your next thing? Hey,
I'm sorry. I do not believe in timeouts. When I discipline my sons, they get three, yeah,
chances.
on their butts, and I'd stand them in front of them, and I talk to them. Do you know why you got um, spanked? So they understand,
Okay,
and then I
so
say, okay, you're good to go. Just
okay,
don't
so
do it
I'm
again.
not with my daughter. We never spanked her, but my daughter could also read at a very young age and write at a very young age. So when if I sent her to her room, that's where all her toys were. So what's she gonna do? She's gonna go up there and play. And
Hmm.
as a teenager, what did you do when you got punished? You went, oh, I can't believe this. I can't believe they're sending me to our room. I didn't do anything wrong.
Hmm.
So what I used to make my daughter do was she had to write an apology letter explaining why what she had done was wrong in order for her to be able to get out that door and go see her friend Katie or whatever it is she wanted to do. And it was age appropriate based on how old she was. And obviously, it was a young one, but it made her take what was in her brain and put it down on paper so she could understand and make sense of it. I can't tell you how well that worked in
Mhm.
so many senses. Now, if a kid can't write, they can always draw a picture and tell the parent what the caption to the picture is, okay? But number one, my daughter became phenomenal at writing. She was in fourth grade, and her computer teacher couldn't believe that she typed a page and a half, and the rest of the class was still struggling to write 4 lines, and that it was as good as it was. But because she had a lot of practice, because rather
But
that was my punishment. And instead of putting my hands on her, because timeout didn't work, you send them to the room, it's not going to work. These kids are born with a more advanced brain than what we were born with. Okay, we are physically,
exactly, I
our
agree with
brain
that
is
100%.
advancing. So our kids are able to better, they need to be able to understand it cognitively so that and when they can understand it cognitively, they take that lesson forward. Case in point with my daughter, she'd been doing this, she had to write apology letters. So one day she's with her girlfriend and they're sitting there drawing, and she wasn't quite sure if she had been mean to her. So she made her an apology card saying, Caitlin, I'm not really sure if I was mean to you or not, but I'm sorry if I was, love. This is application of a positive reinforcement that created a positive reinforcement behavior that helped her to cognitively think. Now, like I said, some
Mhm.
kids won't sit down and write. Well, then let them audio it. Let them do a podcast on it. Whatever it takes to get their brain to have to recognize why what they did is wrong. So, for example, um, the kid tried to run out into traffic and he wasn't listening, and the father said, "Okay, that's it. We're going home. You're going up to your room." And you're going to write an essay about why it is wrong and dangerous for you to just take off and run into traffic. You cannot write, "I'm sorry" 100 times. You must explain it. And it makes the child have to put the points and have to really think about it. And it becomes applicable to other situations because
Yeah,
you have to think critically.
yeah, it basically comes down to there's no right or wrong when it comes to parenting. We have extremes that do cross that line, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the basic knowledge of parenting and how the court systems and the lawyers, the social service, whoever uses this in a courtroom to separate a child, a loving child, from a loving parent.
Yep. And that
Your way
is,
of I'm sure I could probably find 10 lawyers that would say what you did with your daughter was mental abuse,
no, it wasn't. No, they'd never,
because that's how
ever,
not in my
never,
opinion.
ever be able to do it, because then they would be claiming that every single English class a kid took where they were made to write a paper about something was mental abuse. And it's not. You're
Exactly.
educating your
We use
child. There is no physical, there's no
but
psychological,
I'm
there's
saying
no, and a judge
but
would
I'm
look at
saying,
them,
Joni,
Clint,
there
they
are
would be a
lawyers
bunch
that
of
would
idiots. They'd have to be a bunch of idiots, and a judge would have to be pretty stupid to sit there and go, well, that's abuse, when clearly I haven't hit the child. I haven't called them stupid. I haven't called them ugly. All I've done is said, you need to think about what you did and why it was wrong. It's the same thing as putting a kid in timeout and telling them you're to sit there and think about what you did. It's the same thing as spanking a kid on the butt and saying, you better think about this. You're getting spanked because this is what you did. I've made it a cognitive,
well
developmental
here's a
thing.
good one. Well, here's a good one for you. How many states have bullying laws?
All of them. I'm
All
sorry,
of
let
them,
me get
correct.
some water.
Now, most bullying law yeah, go ahead. So most bullying laws are, you know, harassment, calling people names, stuff like this. Isn't this abuse? So
Well, I've already
we
said
have
that.
what we
Clint,
call bullying laws, which is abuse. Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying is we have all these laws that protect our children from this, but they're viewed differently because the terminology. It's
if
all
you
the
ever
same
read my,
stuff. It's just
if
terminology.
this third chapter of my book is all about bullying and what is, and that parental alienation is a form of bullying. It's terrorism.
Mhm.
You and if we don't allow our kids in school to do it each other, why are we allowing parents to bully kids? I have been saying this since the early 2000s. That's my third chapter of my book is all about that because it is a problem. It is bullying. But that isn't the problem. Both sides will agree bullying is a problem and you can't shouldn't bully and coercively control. That's coercive control of your kid. What they just don't want to agree to is that there are false allegations and that parents will use false allegations to keep the kids away from the other parent out of
Mhm.
retaliation and
Now
revenge
we
or anger, fear, hatred, and rage from
to
their own family
to
of origin.
to include this because this is important in the section because what we were
Mhm.
talking about, what our show was supposed to be about today, was a lot of times this is aided by the court system, by the lawyers, because we have
Yes.
to understand again, lawyers have a win all mentality. That's their job.
Mhm.
So the more they win for their
Adversarial.
client, including children, they have to they aid it. The system
This
aids it. You know, we talked about how you said family courts have to be abolished in the long run, you know. And I told you, I said you can never do that because it will back up the court system so ridiculously. What has to happen, in my opinion, is the court system, the domestic relations court system, has to be reshaped for the true value of best interest of a child, which
agreed,
is not
agreed,
the case today.
agreed. I
So
have
how do you do this? How, you as a client have to if you have as a client have to educate your lawyer on parental alienation or control issues or whatever from another parent, then that lawyer needs to get educated by the system, not just by their client. At that point, the client could probably do a better job than the lawyer.
one of the things I think would help. First of all, I agree, but what's happened is we have oftentimes said we say abolish, but really saying the family courts need to be changed. Number one, no attorney
Mhm.
should be allowed into the family courts unless they're using the collaborative divorce method. Adversarial divorce should not be an adversarial divorce attorney who has no training in collaborative divorce should not be allowed into that courtroom. And if they're using adversarial divorce processes, that should be banned. They should be using collaborative. If we went to a more collaborative system, not saying it's easy to deal with the narcissist. It's not. Is it going to happen quickly? No. But there is less damages to the children. I have a client right now who has stayed as far away from court as she could. Yes, they've tried to mediate, go back and forth with her ex. Her ex is a narcissist, no doubt about it. But the child is coming out of this a lot better than he was going into it.
Mhm.
And that is important. If no, is everything going smoothly? Are we finding things that the father has done or the other parent has done or what the mother has done that need to be addressed? Yeah, of course. But it's collaboratively done outside of the courtroom, and the child has been pulled out of the middle, if you will, in a lot of ways. Because but this
Yeah.
also is predicated on the fact that neither side could make allegate. We're neither side's allegations of abuse or anything were disbanded. Um, and the mother never made allegations really of abuse against the father formally. Her attorney knows of the issues, but she's not formally doing it because it's not affecting the child per se. It was affecting her more than anything. Kept out of it, this child is doing much better. He's not where he was
Yeah.
3 years
Well,
ago because a collaborative divorce style
you
is
know,
used.
a lot of people are coming out saying, what the way family court should be. If parent A loves the child and parent B loves the child, let the child be with both parents equally. That's what matters.
Right.
You want to divide the house, you want to divide the cars, you
Clint,
want to
Clint,
divide the bank account.
Clint,
Fine, do that.
Clint. The thing is, this is where the other side draws the line. Because their claim is, well, you can't have shared
Hmm.
parenting with a parent who's abusive. The problem is you haven't provided solid enough evidence that substantiates your claim for abuse. Or one side has more money than the other and has just paid a judge off. That doesn't mean there's not parental alienation. That doesn't mean there's not domestic
I
violence
like
going on.
the fact that you just said, I like the fact that you just said, off.
What? I'm sorry, say it again.
Because we got to realize,
Say it
I
again.
love
I
the
missed
fact that
it.
you just stated, paid the judge off.
Yep. Or their attorney has a better connection with the judge. This is why I call it the good old boys and girls cult of attorneys, attorney cult. Because if you're not in the attorney cult connected to the judges and the prosecutors and the family relations and the guardian ad litems, then you ain't going to win your case because no one's going to listen to you because you got no
Yeah,
standing and you got no relationship. There's so much conflict of interest in the family courts that it is not fair to the kids.
exactly. There's too much favoritism. A lot of people, and I'm not sure, but I know in Canada, they use a lot of arbitrators instead of judges
Yes, mediators.
to handle, cases that are willing to do that. Yeah. So you're not going to a judge, you're going to an arbitrator, and that arbitrator's job is to get you guys to come to an agreement.
So here's the
So
question that they're going to throw at you, Clint.
mediation in the United States, in my opinion, yeah, mediation in the United States, in my opinion, in family in domestic relation courts is backwards.
It should come first, but
The
here's my point.
mediators I've heard of, yeah,
So here's where they're going to come at you with. They're going to say, yeah, but I'm not sitting and mediating in the same room with my abuser. They don't have proof. That person's never been adjudicated as abusive or an unfit parent, but they're going to keep stating it because they figure the more they state it, the more the judge is going to err on the side of caution and the more they're going to get control of the case. This is why,
yeah.
and then, or
Now,
they actually file it and they keep filing it and keep filing it. Like in Robert Garza's case, was it 43 times that his ex kept filing and filing and filing and
mhm,
filing? I'm sorry. That's abuse. It's legal abuse. It's abuse of the system. It's fraud upon the courts. It's vexatious and malicious. She should have gone. He could have filed
now
against her and sent her to jail.
you
But what
just
good of that would that have done his kids? She has
exactly now
abused her children.
you also just made a statement. You also just made a statement that the judge has to side on the cautionary side. That he has to look at the cautionary side. Well,
That's
the cautionary
unfortunate.
side in these sort of cases where they're claiming abuse is go to criminal court. I can't
Okay,
hear criminal charges, so go to criminal court.
criminal court. That I agree with, but you have to understand the system is not well enough trained, probably even in criminal court. Yes, they're faster at it. They probably have a better system to handle it, but it has to be handled very quickly because there are minor children involved who, one, if you put them back together with, if this parent is really abusive and you put them back in with them, it could be a harm situation. Or the issue is he's not abusive, it's a one off. A parent loses their patience. There is no such thing as a perfect parent. I can't say this enough to judges. There is no such thing. If there was, we wouldn't have all these self help books and self help resources. We would
Yep.
have one, the perfect parent. In fact, back to your point, the way we parented 100 years ago is not the way we parent today. That's why, even at 100, you're
Mhm.
learning to be a parent. And so, it's got to be a quick turnaround on an abuse case allegation because if not, and it turns out that it's a false allegation, There is too much time and damage done to that child and its relationship with the other parent based on a lie. And if you live your whole life as a lie, then you end up as a narcissist because otherwise you don't have a choice because the real world doesn't make sense.
Well, here's the kicker to this. Now, I'm gonna state this is in my case, my wife's lawyer filed physical abuse charges for the divorce. Okay, so I was smart enough to get law enforcement involved and get myself charged criminally because there was no abuse. Okay,
Right. That way it
it
could
sounds
be
kind of
handled.
counterproductive, but it actually worked in my case exactly. So I got arrested, charged with domestic violence, got a lawyer
How
and
long was
everything, criminal
how long
charges
did
and
it
all
take for the
this.
case to be heard? How long before you were exonerated?
1 year.
That's a problem, Clint.
one
That's what I'm
year.
talking about. Your children, you're
Exactly. Now let me
separated from you
finish.
for a
Let me
whole
finish.
freaking year because the system isn't working.
No, 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 no. Let me finish. So I got arrested, charged. The judge, in what they call it, is PR bond, personal recognizance bond, which in domestic violence cases doesn't happen. You don't get a PR bond in a domestic violence case. But the judge understood where this was going because it stemmed from a divorce. So for a whole year, every month I had to go to court just to show up. Hey, I'm here. I didn't run. Yada yada yada. Now my visitation with my children didn't change. I was still getting them Wednesday nights for 2 hours and Saturdays for 6 hours. That was the only time I was allowed from the beginning of the divorce proceedings. Okay. So
Okay.
here's what happened in the criminal case. In the criminal case, I was found not guilty of any domestic violence on my wife based on the evidence, video evidence that she presented. Okay. So when I asked my attorney in the criminal case, well, what does this do for my divorce case? He literally tells me, he said, well, they have to drop it because the criminal court just found you not guilty of anything. And actually, the judge stated on the record that my wife was the aggressor. He said, if you wanted, you could actually charge her, which I never did.
Okay.
So a week later, I pick up the paperwork. They expunged everything. I mean, everything's good. I get the paperwork, and I'm pro se at this time, so I file a motion to dismiss in family court based on this decision because we all know our judicial system. If a higher court finds you innocent, a lower court cannot maintain it, which domestic relations
Right.
courts are on the bottom. So I file the motion. A week later, and you're going to love this, I get an order from the family court, domestic relations courts, that they're not applying my motion, that the divorce is going forward based on physical abuse.
That's illegal.
So exactly, it is. But you want to know
And
how I
what
got away
happened
with
with
it?
the case? What
Ju-
did it?
Judicial discretion, because family courts go by a different evidence rule, preponderance of the
So
evidence.
then your theory that they're
Criminal court goes by clear and convincing.
right, which is what it should be in family court, clear and convincing. Um, Not a preponderance of evidence because
Exactly.
evidence can be manufactured. We've all seen evidence manufactured. All right. Well,
Exactly.
I
So
think we've got
this is
hit.
a good point of how messed up the system is.
Yes, and which is why we need better training. We need better oversight. We need the family court civil only and nothing criminal. And you know that what a higher court or another character sermons, they don't have judicial discretion to make to do on preponderance of evidence. When there is no evidence, it's got to be, like in the criminal courts, because otherwise it's too
The apple's got to be an apple.
right. It's otherwise it is too easy for someone to take advantage of the system because even if a person is exonerated in one court, they should not be held accountable in another court for the same crime. That's double jeopardy, basically. And we all know double
But
jeopardy.
it is allowed in. Yep, it
It may
is
be that
allowed in
South
domestic
Carolina
relations
is
courts
more
because
like
the
that.
difference.
I don't know if all courts,
I've heard it
family
from other
courts.
states as well.
Okay, hang
Yeah, I've
on.
heard it from other domestic relations courts in other states.
Are family, are family court judges allowed to use preponderance of evidence rather than, what was the other term?
Clear and convincing.
Thank you, clear and convincing. And hang on. Okay. It says, now remember, folks, this is AI. In family courts, judges are allowed to use the preponderance of the evidence standard in most situations. The standard, also known as the more likely than not standard, requires the party with the burden of proof to demonstrate that their claim is slightly more likely to be true than not true. It is a lower bar compared to beyond a reasonable doubt standard used in criminal cases. However, there are specific situations in family law that require a higher standard of proof known as clear and convincing evidence. This standard requires the evidence to be strong enough to leave no serious doubt. It is a higher standard than the preponderance of the evidence, but lower than stand beyond a reasonable doubt. So the examples they give for where clear and convincing is has to be used is termination of parental rights, allegations of waiver of significant
Hmm.
property rights, allegations of intentional or deliberate misrepresentation of facts, requests for full ownership of assets transferred or undisclosed in violation of fiduciary duty, allegations of fraudulent or improper conduct warranting punitive damages, cases involving modification of visitation orders relating to siblings or grandparents. It is important to note that specific standards of proof and their applications can vary by state. All right. So
Yep.
it may not be the same in all states, but it seems that our family courts are not ascribing to a constitutional preponderance of evidence, not preponderance, I mean clear and convincing evidence. And can all someone has to do is say, well, I thought I did see a bruise mark on my child's arm. Okay, well, it's possible. And you're going to say that it's
Here's
possible that he
here,
was abused?
here's a good here's a good example. With all the evidence that has come out over the last, we'll say, 5 years, is it more likely that we landed on the moon, or is it more likely it was a hoax?
Exactly. I mean,
That is the basic idea of it. It's to us it is the most ridiculous standard in the judiciary system because it allows so much doubt.
yep. And
In
that
there.
doubt,
And when we're dealing with parental alienation, that is what it's based on, is doubt in most cases.
well, look, I think maybe this is a good place where we end. We come back to this on, how do you engage your attorney and help them to understand some of these
Yep.
dynamics? How do you get your attorney to think in a more collaborative format and get the other attorney to think more collaboratively? How do we, learn how to mediate with a narcissist or a difficult personality? How do we need to learn and understand them so that we can know, okay, they don't like it when I use the word blue. So I'm not going to use the word blue. I might use the word red. It's just changing a word, changing the tone. Maybe it doesn't work, but at least it's tried. And if that doesn't work, okay, I have to try something else. But this constant filing of false allegations, that's the stuff that is killing the kids. Yes, if it's true
Yep.
abuse, and my last and final statement, if this was an intact family that did not want to separate, and one of the parents had done something that was not appropriate, what would the family be doing? They would be in therapy. They would be getting help. That parent might be in anger management programs. That parent might be outside of the house for a few days while they revamped and redid something. But they screaming, yelling, backstabbing like this would not be going on. They would be working to make sure that the child had two healthy parents. No different and understand that that parent might have a mental health problem. Maybe they have an alcohol or a drug problem, which is 99%, I shouldn't say 99, but 90% of the time when there is an abuse, a physical, sexual type of, in particular, physical or psychological abuse, it has to do with drugs and alcohol abuse. So maybe that,
I'm not going to go that high.
I thought I read a number recently when we were discussing this somewhere else that it's really that high, that preliminarily the majority of physical and psychological emotional abuse, not talking financial, not talking sexual, okay, is interrelated to substance abuse. Financial abuse,
Well,
um, and sexual abuse, those have different criteria and do not necessarily have anything to do with drugs or alcohol. But that's the point. If this person,
okay, we're gonna close out there
okay,
because we've already got an hour show here, and we're going to continue. I mean, folks, this is the
yeah,
way it's going to be. We're going to do this, like Joni said, we're going to do this once a week. We're going to bring a guest in and just have this sort of conversation, getting information out and stuff. Debate a lot about pot. Somebody's going to play devil's advocate, which I have that role, uh,
and
because
me
that's
too.
how
I
information
double
really gets
advocated
out.
you.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
When two people of different perspectives come together and have these sort of conversations, it's we both believe it on the bottom line. Parental alienation is real and it's provable and is wrong. So but you have to debate the different angles at it. How do you get people informed about it properly? And this is how, by talking about it. It doesn't mean that you can't sit across from somebody who is the opposition, as we call it, who doesn't believe parental alienation is real, that you can't have a decent conversation about it. You may change their mind. They may change your mind. But to talk about it, getting it out there as an open subject is the key.
I'll
So
agree. And
we're
I
going to
think
close out, and Sunday we're gonna bring up a new subject. I think Sunday, if Joni agrees, and this isn't going to be in stone, is probably a good aspect is to bring in the constitutionality in the domestic relations courts pertaining to parental alienation. You know, uh, um, so that's something we can talk about next week, or we may even continue. I'm pretty sure we're going to wind up continuing some aspect of this conversation, as it's always in our conversations. Um, but this is going to be once a week, and we're going to do this separate from our childhood interrupted stuff and our lectures and stuff. We're still going to have those, but this is something we're adding into the mix to get more information out there on a more personable level. Please leave comments, subscribe to the channel and everything, reach out. If you're not a member of PASI, go to our website, find out how you can become a member. We have tons and tons of resources for parents out there and professionals that want to
the
educate themselves on this stuff.
yeah, the website is P as in Peter, A as in Apple, S as in Sam. It stands for psychological abuse support intervention.org. The join button is up in the right.
Okay, she
Clint,
just gave you the website. We're gonna post it on in the comments. And you got anything you want to say in closing?
I like this theory. I like this bantering, and we make it work. Till next Sunday.
We're out. Peace.